Thank you very much. As Dr. Rohit was saying, very often we see these patients in our OPD whom we think have dry eye. We've given some lubricants and we hope they do well. And they should have done well, but unfortunately, they come back sometime later without feeling much better or sometimes feeling worse and complaining miserably. And that's not something that anyone wants to see in your OPD. So today we're trying to analyze what could be going wrong and why lubricants don't work. So when we look at dry eye itself, we know that sometimes the diagnosis, even though it seems like a very simple condition, sometimes the diagnosis itself may have missed us because there are mimickers, like even an ocular allergy could mimic a dry eye. Sometimes there may be a mismatch between the type of dry eye and the lubricating drops, and we'll highlight a little more about that. And there may be other known risk factors associated, especially the systemic collagen vascular diseases, thyroid, rosacea, which we may have missed. And there may be some additional issues in the eye, like blepharitis, MGD, Demodex. There may be a cicatrizing condition. And all of these may be contributing to the lack of response to this patient. So coming to the accurate diagnosis and subdiagnosis, I won't dwell much on this because we all know the new definition is much more in depth, and the dry eye now is much more multifactorial with the loss of homeostasis, hyperosmolarity, and inflammation. But when we look at it from this broad aspect, then of course we understand that our lubricants in some cases may be woefully inadequate. Because our dry eye then, to simplify it, is not just a decrease in the tear components, aqueous, lipid, or mucin. There's also inflammation there. There may be corneal nerve related changes. There's definitely hyperosmolarity, and there can be changes like autophagy and desiccation, which result in epithelial changes. So when you look at it from this comprehensive view, we do realize that we have to look at it in a much more broad way to try and treat these patients. So when we say there's a mismatch in disease and therapy, we have to look at the type of dry eye and the type of lubricating drops. So which is the ideal lubricating drop? So ideally, we would want a drop which would try and complete, treat all of these problems that we talked about, replenish the aqueous, lipid, mucin, have an anti-inflammatory effect, promote nerve growth, maintain the osmolarity, reduce desiccation, pH, everything. But unfortunately, we do realize that so much of multitasking is probably not possible by a mere drop. So the reality is that we do need to use permutations and combinations of various medications that we have at hand. So very important is to know your tear components. So broadly, when we look at tears, we know that most of them are water-based or aqueous-based. There are certain oil-based components, but very few. And these are on the right side. You can see the list out of all the various compositions of the various drops. The oil-based, as I was saying, are very few, especially in India. The few that we have are, some paraffin-based medications and some which have castor oil in them. So that would be relegated to use if you have a very strong lipid deficiency. But usually we would stick to the more common ones which are available to us. For a lubricant to be effective in reducing the desiccation, which is basically the drying on the surface and the resultant problems, the surface retention has to be very good. And when we understand anything about surface retention, it means that it would depend on a lot of other factors, including the pH, the blink rate of the patient, the evaporation rate from the surface. So what is shocking to know is that, even though we give lubricants maybe 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, the maximum a lubricant actually stays is usually less than a minute. The best one, even sodium hyaluronate, which is supposed to be one of the newer lubricants, still has quite a low retention rate. So we usually, in a more severe dry eye, we definitely need to have a much higher frequency of instillation. Another important thing, and this is relevant for us in India, is that many of the lubricants at a higher temperature become less viscous. So you'd often see patients who come back and say that, when they keep it in the fridge and use, they feel much better. And I always attributed it to the fact that it was cooler and then gave some relief. But the fact of the matter is that it also has an increased viscosity and helps the tears remain on the ocular surface a little longer. And that's also adding to it. Coming to the inflammation, of course, inflammation of varying grades underlies DED of any etiology. Sometimes we may not even see the classic signs of inflammation like redness or congestion, but it's still there, smoldering there. And that we can see very often on our confocal, or a very easy tool is by using a questionnaire which would show the high symptomatology of these patients. We need to treat these patients with appropriate anti-inflammatory medications. And of course, with a lot of congestion or a lot of inflammation, you need a short course of topical steroids. Usually a soft steroid is adequate, but more severe dry eyes require long-term use of cyclosporin. Usually the most common is 0.05 eye drops. And when we say long-term, at least 3 to 6 months. What we must know about cyclosporin, and we've studied this in detail and published as well on how it helps in both inflammation and reducing nociception, is that you can get preservative-free and those with preservatives. Of course, we know that for a more severe dry, we prefer a preservative-free. It comes in two concentrations of 0.05 and 0.1. The more common ones we use is 0.05. And you also have aqueous-based and oil-based emulsion. No financial disclosure, but the one we have, preservative-free Emu drops, for example, is an aqueous-based, and Restasis is an oil-based emulsion. The osmolarity is another point which is very important to remember when we are treating dry eye. And we have certain osmoprotectant drops, and they contain things like betaine, L-carnitine, or erythritol. Now, when we know there's a hyperosmolar situation going on, we try to have either an isoosmolar or a hypoosmolar drops, which will then counteract the hyperosmolarity. Again, no financial disclosure, but the most common drops available to us as osmoprotectants are osmodrops and Optiv, and hypoosmolar, even the hyaluronate-based drops have hypoosmolar versions of them. Autophagy is something which has become very, very come into the limelight, a lot, because we found that once the autophagy increases, it reduces the inflammation on the human ocular cells. So it mitigates stress-induced inflammation. And trehalose, which is now a very commonly used medication in dry eye medications, augments this autophagy. So it has an extra role to play and not just a lubricating role, which is very, very important. Preservatives, of course, we know a lot about it. It's once we have a preservative like BAK, it would add to the toxicity on an already damaged surface. So we try to keep those which have what are called as the disappearing preservatives, which basically oxidize to a non-toxic substance like purite. pH is also very important. I'll just highlight the most important point, that certain medications like the polyols have HB-GOAR, and HB-GOAR turns to gel at 7.5, which increases the retention time. But what we must know is that if you combine it with other medications, especially if you're treating an infection, then those medications have a very low pH. So then it's totally counterproductive trying to mix these two medications. Systemic involvement, of course, with dry eye is another very important reason why our medications may not work. We just have to remember the most common ones, and definitely if you suspect, especially in more severe conditions, we have to evaluate for them in a lot of detail. Another very important feature is the other points, like look at the lids very carefully, look if ask the history, what kind of occupation they have, whether they are contact lens users. Orthoptics is something that has really, changed the way we practice. A lot of patients who come in thinking that they have dry eye, because they do often diagnose themselves, or even if we think that they have dry eye and not responding, have shown significant changes on their, accommodative insufficiency or convergence insufficiency and other changes, and respond dramatically to exercise. A very common thing is partial blinkers, and we don't even realize, but it's important to look for partial blinkers, and something like Demodex is extremely common. The future lies in trying to get all this, easy point of care diagnostic kit, so that we can check for nerve-related changes, check for inflammation, and then targeted, customized treatment would be the way forward. Thank you very much for a very patient listening.